Castaway is an old 2000s movie that talks about a FedEx employee who gets into a plane crash, leaving him stranded on an island for 4 years. This movie was best known for its exploration of the subjects of time and isolation during Chuck's isolation, as he maintained his sanity with his valuable companion, Wilson. But today, I want to take a look at a scene known for the emotional aspect, the scene where Chuck loses Wilson. After Chuck leaves the island with Wilson, he faces tons of storms, and although he makes it through, Wilson falls off the boat, leaving Chuck noticeably upset. We then ask the question, how does the Chuck and Wilson separation scene talk about life challenges? The scene where Chuck loses Wilson reveals the necessity of moving on after facing life's challenges because they only hold someone back. I'll be using shot composition, editing, theatrical elements, and sound to break down the scene.
When are you defending your dissertation?
January 12th.
When Chuck jumps after Wilson, he makes sure he has some way to come back by going back for rope. And even when he jumps, he keeps a very tight grip. When he loses his grip on the rope, Chuck desperately tries to get back to it, but he also hesitates. He hesitates because he wants to return to Wilson, but cannot let go of his chance back to his old life. In the scene as they're getting separated, Chuck knows that with the raft, he has a chance of going back home. But in his heart, Wilson has been with him for the majority of his nightmare and had only been his only companion. This hesitation and struggle emphasizes this introspection for Chuck, whether he wants to go back to the island with Wilson or leave him behind and move on with his life with the raft. This was the scene where the first piece of music was played for almost the entire 2 freaking hours. Anyways, the score of the music has a BPM of 72 and is described to be played as larghetto, which is a musical phrase that means to play at a slow tempo, slower than andante but faster than largo. This musical marking usually expresses a sense of breadth, often used to convey a feeling of calm or introspection. Once again, emphasized by the fact that this is the first piece of music in the entire 2 hours. Let's watch the scene with the music.
Wilson! I'm sorry, Wilson! Wilson, I'm sorry! I'm sorry! Wilson! I can't! Wilson!
The music emphasizes almost a painful but glad mood to highlight the idea that Chuck is now finally free of the pain that he had dealt for many years. The shot composition for the scene is unstable, going up and down, mimicking the tumult of the waves. This moment of being torn between Wilson and the raft is also being symbolized that this is a moment of turbulence internally for Chuck. This shot composition here also shows Wilson disappearing and reappearing as the waves cause the camera to bob up and down as Wilson goes back into the sea. Wilson belongs to the island. He comforted Chuck for almost his entire time there, and his entire persona was just made up by Chuck to help him be sane on the island. Leaving him behind and the shot composition showing Wilson fading away highlights the idea that Chuck is leaving his problem behind. Ever since Chuck arrives on the island, the editing in this movie became long, 20+ second shots. Most of the cuts are just moments where Chuck is trying to complete a singular activity over a day going from morning to night, trying to show the idea that Chuck has lost track of time and doing each task takes ages. However, during this scene, the cuts were a lot more fast-paced, going back and forth between Chuck and Wilson. The scenes that consist of more regular back-and-forth shots only take place at the beginning of the movie, where Chuck was talking to his family and wife. The reason why the cuts are suddenly shorter are because they're trying to show that as Chuck lets Wilson go, he's returning to his original world, as he's leaving his old world behind.
Crunch time! Crunch time!
Both the sound and theatrical elements focus on having to giving up one or the other. However, the theatrical elements prove that Chuck ultimately ended up choosing the raft, which leads to the question as to why did he give up Wilson. To answer that, recall what I said about 2 minutes ago. Wilson was Chuck's mental comforter, meaning he was made up in Chuck's mind, only an imaginary friend. Wilson was created when Chuck arrived on the island and belongs to the island. When Chuck was forced to choose between the two, the raft symbolizing home, and Wilson returned to the island, Chuck had to choose the raft so that he could return and move on with his life, while leaving Wilson behind, which was highlighted by the shot composition as he floated away into the distance, quite literally leaving him behind, proving that the scene where Chuck loses Wilson reveals the necessity of moving on after facing life challenges because they only hold someone back.